Welcome to Serial Labyrinths, the podcast that plunges into the twisted minds and most brutal crimes of serial killers from around the world. I'm your host, Alberto Lopez. Tonight, we go deep into Ecatepec, a chaotic, crime-plagued suburb just north of Mexico City in the state of Mexico. In 2018, what started as routine disappearances unraveled into one of Mexico's most depraved serial cases, the monsters of Ecatepec, Juan Carlos Hernández Bejar and Patricia Martínez Bernal. On the surface, they were just another struggling couple in Jardines de Morelos. Juan Carlos Hernández Bejar was born on March 1st, 1985 in Michoacán, and he used to do odd jobs, construction scraps, selling used phones on Facebook, collecting recyclables. Patricia Martínez Bernal went door to door peddling clothes, cheese, perfumes, esquites, or posted deals on social media. They lived at Playa Tijuana Street, 530, with their 4 kids, ages 10, 6, 4, and a 10-month-old at the time of arrest. Neighbors saw them as normal, hauling black bags they said were trash, chatting casually with people around. But inside that unfinished concrete house, something far darker had been happening for years, from 2010 all the way to 2018. The end came on October 4th, 2018, but it didn't happen in a dramatic raid or a shootout. It happened quietly, almost casually, on an ordinary street in Jardines de Morelos. The police had been working the disappearances for weeks. 3 women gone in quick succession: Arlette in April, Evelyn in July, Nancy in September. All from the same neighborhood, all young, all mothers, all vanished after heading out for what seemed like routine errands. The investigators were already following a thin thread, a stolen cell phone belonging to Arlette Samantha Olguin Hernandez. Someone had turned it on, just long enough for the signal to ping. That morning, officers set up surveillance near Playa Tijuana Street. They waited. Then they saw them. Juan Carlos Hernández Bejar stepped out first. He was pushing a baby stroller, the kind you'd see any parent using on a normal day. A thick blanket covered the top, tucked in tight. Behind him came Patricia Martínez Bernal, carrying 2 large sacks slung over her shoulders. They moved slowly, like people who had no reason to hurry. The officers watched from a distance at first. Then the wind shifted. A strong, unmistakable, rotting stench rolled down the street. It hit the team like a wall, sweet, heavy, unmistakable. Human, the kind of smell that lingers in your clothes for days. They moved in fast. When the officers approached, Juan Carlos froze mid-step. Patricia didn't flinch. She looked at them with flat, empty eyes and said the words without a tremor in her voice. Human. The stroller was opened first. Under the blanket, plastic bags, soaked through, leaking. Arms, legs, a torso wrapped in cloth. The sacks were cut open on the spot. More pieces, some still wrapped in clothing that belonged to the missing women. They were arrested right there on the sidewalk. No chase, no resistance, just the 2 of them standing beside the stroller and the sacks, surrounded by the smell and the sudden silence of the street. Within hours, the house was swarmed. Inside, the full horror unfolded. 8 20-liter buckets lined up against the wall, each one filled with human suspended in cement, like grotesque trophies sealed in gray. The refrigerator door was opened to reveal stacked like frozen meat, organs wrapped in plastic, a small heart floating in a jar of formaldehyde on the shelf. A Santa Muerte altar sat in the corner, candles burned down to stubs, human preserved in alcohol as offerings to the saint of death. Been scraped and dried, fat rendered and mixed into soil for the potted plants on the roof. Muscles had been portioned out and fed to the dogs. Bones were missing, sold, they would later admit, to a santero known as El Bones, which means bones, for 500 pesos apiece. The rest had been boiled in metal drums on the azotea, or stuffed into black trash bags and scattered across vacant lots throughout Ecatepec. It was not the work of a single night. It was a system, a routine, a life built around death. They confessed almost immediately, not out of guilt, not out of fear. Juan Carlos and Patricia sat there in the interrogation room and laid it all out with the same flat calm they had shown when the police opened the stroller. They admitted to at least 10 murders. Juan Carlos quickly raised the number, up to 20, he said, and he wasn't finished. He had a personal target in mind, 100. A clean, round number he wanted to reach before he was done. He spoke about it like it was a project, something he had been carefully working toward. Cannibalism wasn't an occasional act for him. It was routine, a habit, something he had been doing since he was 22, back when he first crossed that line and never looked back. He ranked the way a butcher might grade meat. He told the interviewers that prettier women gave first-class cuts, tender, better flavor. Thighs and legs were his favorite parts. He would slice them into steaks, bread them, fry them. Patricia cooked the rest into tamales. He made sure to point out that she ate too. Not the kids, he said. He drew a line there, as if that made the rest acceptable. The hearts were different. Those went to the Santa Muerte altar. Small, preserved offerings, placed carefully among the candles and the figurines. A ritual sacrifice to the saint of death. What they did went far beyond murder. It was ultra-violence in every sense. The domination came first. Total control, total submission, reducing another human being to something he could use, break, and consume. Then the mutilation. In the bathroom, piece by piece, over hours sometimes. He described it as tiring work, but pleasurable. The power fantasy stretched out across every step. From the moment he lured them inside, through the binding, the lies, the fatal wound, the cutting, the disposal, the eating. Every act layered more control, more ownership, more proof that he was the one deciding who lived and who became part of him. He never apologized. He never wavered. He simply explained it all, step by step, as if he were describing a job he had mastered. And in his mind, he had. To understand how this nightmare unfolded, we have to go back to the beginning, back to the mind that turned childhood trauma into a killing machine. Juan Carlos served 9 months in the Mexican Army's 2nd Battalion of Presidential Guards. That was where his comrades gave him the nickname El Terror Verde, the Green Terror, because of the intimidating and sadistic attitude he carried in uniform. But the violence inside him had started long before he ever put on that green. From the leaked psychological evaluation interrogations, we learn what shaped him early. At age 10, he was left with a female caregiver while his mother had numerous affairs with other men. The caregiver subjected him to repeated sexual abuse, acts that left him deeply traumatized and disgusted as a child. He witnessed his mother's affairs, men in compromising positions, noises while his dad worked submissively, threatened with violence. Powerless rage built inside him. He said no woman would ever disrespect him again. As a child, Juan Carlos fell 2 stories headfirst onto concrete. It wasn't a small tumble. He dropped straight down from a second-floor landing, no railing, no warning, just open air and then the hard slap of the ground against his skull. The impact cracked bone, exposed fracture, meaning the skin split open and the white of the skull showed through, blood everywhere. Neighbors carried him inside. His mother rushed him to the hospital, where he stayed for a full month. They drilled, they stitched, they kept him still while the swelling pressed against his brain. When he finally came home, there was a visible scar running across the top of his head, a jagged line that never quite faded. From that day forward, chronic migraines became part of his life. Sharp, pounding attacks that came without mercy, often at night, often when everything else was quiet. But he didn't see the fall as damage. He saw it as transformation. Before the accident, he said, he was slow, behind in school, struggling to keep up. After, everything changed. He claimed the blow inflamed the brain, his own words, and suddenly he was different. Grades went from failing to perfect, only A's. Math problems that stumped other kids, he solved in seconds. Details other children missed, he caught instantly. He started noticing things, patterns, movements, weaknesses, in ways that felt almost unnatural. He said it gave him curiosity, an edge, a sharpness no one else had. The doctors and the people around him thought the fall might have left him diminished. They worried about permanent impairment. He looked at them like they were the ones who didn't understand. To him, the injury had unlocked something, made him better, smarter, superior. And yet, it also brought something else. Hallucinations. A persistent black dog figure that appeared in the corners of rooms, in shadows, in the dark spaces between thoughts. He described it clearly, always the same shape, always watching. "That black dog bugs me," he said. It followed him. It irritated him. It never left. He insisted over and over that it wasn't madness. "I'm not crazy, boss," he told the interviewer, voice steady but edged with irritation. "I'm fine, completely sane and well." He repeated it like a mantra, like he needed the world to believe it, like if he said it enough times, the black dog would fade, the headaches would stop, the rage would quiet. But it never did. And deep down, he didn't want it to. Because that rage, that sharp, burning thing the fall had helped awaken, was what drove him forward. It was what made him feel alive. And it was what would eventually lead him to take lives. The killing started earlier than most people might expect. Somewhere between age 18 and 22. Juan Carlos didn't give an exact date for the first one, but he did describe one early confession in clear, unemotional detail. The kind of memory that stayed sharp even years later. He was 22, already angry, already carrying the resentment that had been building since childhood. His girlfriend at the time was 19. They had been seeing each other and he would visit her house early, 5 in the morning sometimes, because her mother left for work at 4 to catch the metro. One day he found out she was dating someone else. That was enough. The rage came fast. He didn't plan it, he said, but he didn't stop it either. He took an electrical cord, an ordinary extension cable, the kind you find in any home, and wrapped it around her neck. He strangled her until she stopped moving. Then he laid her body back on the bed, arranged it carefully, almost gently, and walked away. He left her there for someone else to find. The other man, the one she had been dating, became the obvious suspect. The police focused on him. The evidence pointed his way. He was questioned, pressured, maybe even charged. Juan Carlos watched it all happen from a distance. No one looked at him. No one suspected him. Not the family, not the authorities, not even the girlfriend's friends. He slipped through completely. He told the interviewer this story with the same flat tone he used for everything else. No pride, no shame, no tremor in his voice. It was just a fact, a thing that happened. The first time he crossed the line and realized how easy it could be to disappear someone and let the world blame someone else. He never said whether he felt anything in that moment. Fear, relief, satisfaction. He only said what happened next. He kept going. That early kill didn't stop him. It showed him it could be done. And so he did it again and again. And he kept doing it for years, until the day the stench from the stroller gave him away on a quiet street in Ecatepec. In 2008, Juan Carlos walked into a bar called La Cueva in Ecatepec. That's where he met Patricia Martinez Bernal. She worked there, behind the counter, serving drinks, talking to customers, blending into the dim lights and the noise. He noticed her. They talked. They went out a few times. And not long after, he started telling her things most people would never say out loud. He confessed his killings early, casually, almost testing the water. He told her he had already taken lives, that he had strangled a girlfriend years before and walked away clean, that he had done it more than once. Patricia didn't run. She didn't call the police. She laughed. She thought it was a joke, some dark story he was spinning to impress her or scare her. She played along. They moved in together soon after. What started as a relationship quickly became something else. Patricia didn't just accept what he told her. She began to participate. Patricia assisted. She helped clean up. She helped dispose of remains. She even prepared portions of the tamales, steaks, when he asked. She ate too, according to him. She had to eat, he said later. Not the kids, but her, yes. Over the years, 4 children were born into that house. The older ones, 10, 6, 4 at the time of the arrest, grew up surrounded by secrets they couldn't fully understand, but must have sensed. The fridge was always padlocked. Strange smells drifted from the kitchen or the bathroom. Black bags were carried out at night. The children were kept away during the worst moments. Patricia would take them outside or send them to a neighbor, but they were there. Living in the same space where bodies were cut apart, where food was cooked, where buckets of cemented remains waited in the corner. Juan Carlos never seemed worried about them finding out. He believed he could control everything, the smell, the noise, the evidence. He believed the padlock and the lies were enough. But the older kids were old enough to notice things. A locked fridge isn't normal. A mother who suddenly takes you outside for no reason isn't normal. A father who disappears into the bathroom for hours with a strange woman isn't normal.
They lived like that for years. A family on the outside, a slaughterhouse on the inside. And Patricia, once the woman who laughed at his stories, became the one who helped him write new ones.
The pattern began in 2010. They put up a fake ad for a domestic worker. Patricia later said Juan Carlos wanted encounters with outsiders, despite her being there. The first known victim was Fabiola Luquin Rey, about 22 years old, married with a child. Juan Carlos pretended to hire her, told her the dirty laundry was in the bathroom. Once she turned her back, he attacked her from behind, bound her hands and feet, subjected her to violence, and inflicted a fatal wound to the neck. He told her it was only a robbery and that nothing would happen if she cooperated. Patricia took her young son outside. After about 30 minutes, Juan Carlos opened the door and said she could come back in. Fabiola was dead on the floor. Patricia panicked and threatened to report it. He told her not to be stupid, that they would both go to prison. They consumed portions of the flesh from her leg. The rest went into a cardboard box, and they dumped it at night in the Lázaro Cárdenas lot. They were trash collectors themselves, so hauling trash at night raised no suspicion. Her clothes were thrown away. About 2 months later came Luz del Carmen Miranda, 13 years old, a neighbor, daughter of Jorge and Araceli. Patricia had borrowed a stove from Jorge and returned it through Luz while her parents were out. Luz went inside the house and sat on the couch. Juan Carlos started complimenting her beauty, got close, and threatened her. Robbery, do as I say. He bound her feet with a bandage, left her hands loose. He said he could handle her, and threw her on the mattress. He ordered Patricia to participate. She refused, left with their son to gather trash. When Patricia came back, Luz was dead in the bathroom with a fatal wound to the neck, and her body was dismembered. Patricia's only complaint was that the bathroom was filthy. Juan Carlos replied, "What did you expect? The bathroom is too small." There were signs of struggle on her hands. They consumed portions of her flesh. The rest was dumped in the same lot. They continued living next to the grieving family for 2 years, asking about the investigation, even giving statements about her disappearance. Her body was found years later in a roadside sewage canal. Years passed with sporadic kills in other places. Tultitlan, hotels in Zona Rosa, the woman known as La Jicaleta in Tepito, an ex-girlfriend he killed in her home after a fight. Then 2018 arrived, and the compulsion became unbearable. He committed 3 quick kills. Arlette Samantha Olguin Hernandez, 22 years old, mother of 3. On April 25, 2018, Patricia lured her with a pants sale. That morning, Arlette had taken her son Iker to kinder and returned home with her 3-year-old daughter. Juan Carlos killed her on the couch when she tried to scream. He inflicted a fatal wound to the neck. He dismembered her in the bathroom. The toddler told her grandma, "Mommy is upstairs." The killers lived right above, on the roof near the wash basins. They consumed portions of her remains. He had practiced cannibalism since age 22. Juan Carlos later said their eyes met on the stairs, and there was chemistry between them. He knew she would be next. The motive? She had called them nacos, tacky, which he saw as an offense to Patricia. Whoever offends her must die. Her last words were, "Tell my mother that I love her very much." They sold her phone and bones to a santero known as El Bons.
He cynically said that if the prosecutor had entered the house earlier during the investigation, he would have killed her too. Remains were still there. He said beauty was the reason. Then, Evelyn Rojas Matus, 29 years old. On July 26, 2018, she was lured with clothes for her son's birthday the next day. Juan Carlos applied an army lock to subdue her, assaulted her amid screams, stabbed her, took her to the bathroom, and dismembered her. Also, Nancy Noemi Huitron Solorio, 28 years old, with her 2-month-old baby Valentina. On September 6, 2018, Patricia picked her up in a bicycle taxi just 1 block away from her house, promising items for the baby. Juan Carlos waited inside, threatened her to stay quiet, took the baby from her arms, assaulted her, and dismembered her. Parts were burned on the roof in a drum. The baby was sold to a contact Juan Carlos had found for 15,000 pesos. Nancy's last phone call to her mother: "I'll be with you right away. I'm with Marta and Carlos." Then the phone went off. Patricia said he didn't want Nancy's flesh, took only a little for the dogs, and the rest was burned.
In the psych interview, he showed zero remorse.
He ranked their flesh. Prettier women were first class, thigh steaks, tamales by Patricia. Their hearts were offered to Santa Muerte. "I'm just taking out the trash of this world." Juan Carlos made it clear, with no hesitation and no hint of regret, that prison would never change what was inside him. "If I'm released," he said, the words coming out calm and certain, "I'm going to keep killing women." He explained it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. There were 3 reasons, he told the interviewer, 3 forces that drove him and would never stop. First, the compulsion, the headaches that never left, the voices that whispered when everything was quiet, the pressure inside his skull that only grew stronger the longer he tried to ignore it. Second, the hatred, a deep, burning hatred toward women that had taken root long before he ever held a knife, fed by every memory of powerlessness and humiliation from his childhood. And third, the need, a raw, physical hunger that he could not control and did not want to control. He admitted something even colder. He enjoyed the pain he caused beyond the moment of the kill. He spoke about befriending the families of his victims. He would sit with them, accept their food, take their money when they offered help, talk to them like a neighbor, like someone who cared, all while knowing exactly what he had done to their daughter or granddaughter. The betrayal was part of the pleasure. He described it plainly, almost proudly. "I befriended the relatives. I ate their food. I took their money. And I killed their daughter and their granddaughter." Then came the line that still echoes in the leaked recordings, delivered without a trace of shame. "I their daughter and their granddaughter. It was all pleasure, and I enjoyed it." He paused, as if savoring the memory, before adding, "I was having fun harming them." There was no remorse in his voice, no flicker of guilt, only satisfaction. The suffering he left behind, the grief, the confusion, the shattered trust, was not a side effect. It was part of what he wanted, part of what fed him. And he made sure everyone listening understood. If he ever walked free again, that cycle would continue. The compulsion would win. The hatred would win. The need would win. and the families he chose next would never see him coming. Juan Carlos Hernández Bejar never once doubted his own sanity. Even after everything he had done, after the confessions, after the buckets of cemented after the refrigerator full of and the altar with humans, he looked straight into the eyes of the interviewer and said he was completely well. "I'm fine, completely sane and well." He believed the childhood fall that cracked his skull had done something extraordinary to him. What doctors and others thought might leave him damaged or diminished, he saw as a gift. The injury, he claimed, had inflamed the brain, and from that moment on, he went from being a slow learner to someone who excelled in school, solving math problems faster than anyone else, noticing details other children missed. He carried that belief into adulthood. He was intellectually superior, a kind of genius shaped by violence. That sense of superiority showed in how he carried himself during the interrogations. He spoke with confidence, almost pride. He corrected the interviewer when they underestimated him. He got irritated when they called him dumbass or treated him like he was stupid, because, in his mind, his head was too sharp for that. He had hidden from the police for years, he reminded them. He had outsmarted them until the very end. Even on Facebook, long before the arrest, he fed that mind with dark material. He followed pages dedicated to witchcraft, serial killers, black magic, true psychopaths, and the inner workings of twisted minds. He studied them. He absorbed them. It wasn't casual scrolling, it was research, fuel for the fantasies that had already taken root. Now, in prison, the picture is colder still. He is classified as a high-risk inmate, high-security wing, 1 hour a day outside his cell, just enough time to feel the sun before being locked back in. Isolation is strict, contact is limited. The guards who watch him have heard him say the same disturbing thing more than once. He needs human every 3 months to calm his mind. He told them it was the only thing that stops the voice in his head, the black dog that still follows him in the dark corners of his cell. The guards passed it along, not as a joke, but as something he genuinely believes. And according to reports from inside, Patricia, still his partner even behind bars, sent word to him. She reportedly told him to eat his own fingers and drink his own blood, that it was the only thing that could calm him now. He accepted the advice without hesitation, because in his mind he remains sane, superior, controlled. The world may see a monster locked away, but Juan Carlos still sees a man who is simply doing what he was always meant to do. These are the unfiltered words of a man who looks straight into the eyes of his interrogators and without a trace of remorse explained exactly why he preferred feeding his dogs of his victims rather than letting those women continue breathing his air.
Los oficiales encontraron corazones en ofrenda de Santa Muerte. Y prefiero que mis perritos coman carne de estas mujeres a que ellas sigan respirando mi oxígeno. 1000 veces que coman los perritos y las ratas a que ellas sigan caminando por aquí.
¿Alguna otra misión que tengas en la vida?
¿Misión? Pues mi patrón no quiero salir de esta. Pero si salgo, de una vez le digo a los patrones, voy a seguir matando mujeres.
¿Por la voz, por Dios o por tu decisión?
Uno, porque a veces no me deja dormir esta tarde. 2, por el odio que les tengo. Y 3, pues si sigo teniendo necesidad todavía de hacer. Que coman mis hijos o que coman a otro lado, mejor mis hijos. Que coman mis perros a otro lado, mejor mis perros.
Cuando ocurrió lo de Mónica, ¿estuviste deprimido? ¿Fuiste a atención? ¿Te dieron algo?
No me hicieron caso, patrón. Los policías, no ustedes. No me hicieron caso. Se burlaron de mí. Tu mujer se fue con otro cabrón. Ese niño no es tuyo. Ya deja de moverle, güey. Yo lo quería mucho.
Pero no fuiste a atención médica. Estuviste triste, llorando. ¿Te entraron momentos de angustia, de miedo?
De matar mujeres. Yo dije, si yo no fui feliz en ese momento, nadie lo va a hacer. Y yo lo que he visto, yo pretendiendo que como yo no lo fui, nadie lo va a hacer. Y mientras yo siga aquí en la tierra, voy a seguir haciendo todo lo que yo pueda. Y divirtiéndome de ese daño. Porque a todos los familiares de esta chica yo les hablaba bien. Principalmente a don Salvador. Me chingué a su hija y me chingué a su amiga. Y con todo gusto, y lo disfruté. Mientras yo esté aquí, voy a seguir así.
¿Cuánto tiempo pasó, Juan Carlos, de que se fue Mónica a que empezó todo esto?
Aproximadamente 2 semanas.
¿Después has intentado ir a alguna atención psicológica?
Yo soy bien. Yo estoy bien. Lo que hago está bien, patrón, porque estoy limpiando el mundo nada más de porquería. Yo estoy completamente sano y bien.
¿Tú fuiste a guardería, kinder, directo a primaria?
Sí.
¿Reportaron algo en el kinder o la primaria de tu conducta o aprendizaje?
Al momento era dentro de aprendizaje, patrón.
¿Te aprobaste el grado?
Era dentro de aprendizaje, pero después de que me caí de la escalera, iba con puro 10. No sé si se inflamó el pinche cerebro, pero después de ese momento, perfección en la escuela. Pero realmente me dan cuenta de cosas que muchos niños no se dan cuenta de esa edad. A mí me daban curiosidad. ¿Por qué no sabía? Ponían cosas de matemáticas y rapidísimo, sin ningún problema.
¿Por qué ya acabaste la carrera?
No sé, patrón.
Tú eres hombre y te gusta ser hombre.
Claro.
¿Y solo te gustan las mujeres o te gustan los hombres?
Puras mujeres. Exactamente. No soy ni bi ni nada de eso.
¿Novias cuántas llegaste a tener?
Muchísimas, patrón.
Más o menos.
Dentro de lo que cabe desde secundaria hasta los 22 años tuve muchas. Después de los 22 para acá, toda pareja sentimental que yo tenía terminaba dándome la madre. Mínimos pretextos.
¿Y con cuántas mujeres tuviste relaciones?
Muchísimos, patrón. Es una aproximada.
¿Alguien llegó a abusar de ti?
De joven, de niño, de 10 años, una mujer, mi mamá me encargaba con una mujer para que mamá se pudiera irse de puta. Mi mamá me encargaba todos los días con una mujer, y esa mujer me lo chupaba, esa mujer se subía, esa mujer me hacía hacerle cosas que a mí como niño me desagradaban bastante. Odio, rotundamente. Mi mamá andaba también de puta, con otro güey. La veía yo cómo le alzaban las patas, cómo le ponían de perro. Escuchaba yo sus ruidos. Y mi papá trabajando. cosa que a mí me molestaba mucho.
Claro.
Mi papá ahí estuvo de mandilón con ella, mi mamá quería navajearlo, picarlo, acuchillarlo, y yo viendo todo. ¿Y cómo defender a mi papá si no podía? Pero yo dije, ni una pinche vieja me va a tratar. Jamás.
¿Desde qué edad trabajas, Juan Carlos, si empiezas a ganar dinero?
Yo me salí de mi casa a los 16 años. Tuve trabajos ocasionales. No duraba porque era muy inestable. Huevón, me pagaba tarde y todo eso. No me interesaba. Mi esposa la conocí en un bar. La saqué yo en una salida. Me la chingué en mi cuarto. Le pregunté, ¿cuánto va a ser? No, la verdad me gustas mucho y quise pasar un rato contigo. Patrón, me dio un tremendo coraje. A mí me molestan las mujeres que cogen con alguien y no piden dinero. Tremendamente. Estaba yo así, de darle la madre a mi propia esposa antes de que fuera mi esposa. Lo que se cree. Me hizo la noche, me alivianó, me hizo reír. ¡Wow! Se parece tanto a ella.
¿Y ella cómo se llama?
Patricia. Se parece mucho.
¿Ya antes habías tenido problemas legales, Juan Carlos?
Fue muy cuidadoso, patrón. Pero una ocasión nada más me agarraron con una navaja aquí en Playas. Una patrulla municipal. Andaba yo con navaja porque yo quería picar a cualquier cabrón que se me pusiera enfrente que me diera de pedo. Pero antes se puede picar a alguien, pues me agarra la pinche patrulla. Me presentaron hacia Betis, llegó mamá y pagó.
¿Practicabas algún deporte? ¿Tenías alguna actividad recreativa?
Sí, señor, practiqué box, practiqué karate, practiqué kickboxing.
¿Aquí te han operado, hospitalizado, puesto yeso?
Nada más de niño, cuando estuve en hospital durante un mes completo por la caída que tuve. Nada más.
¿Solo eso?
Sí.
¿A ti te platicaron, te dijeron que perdiste el conocimiento tras el golpe?
Todo me platicaron, patrón.
Sí.
Me platicaron cómo fue absolutamente todo el accidente.
¿Perdiste el conocimiento? ¿Cómo estuvo?
Yo caí de 2 pisos, golpeé directamente con el concreto y esta tapa que usted ve aquí, a lo mejor se está bien.
Sí, se ve una cicatriz. Se abrió.
Con exposición.
Ah,
Estuve un mes internado con mis inyecciones, con mi vacuna antitetánica y todo el procedimiento que debía de ser. Y después de ahí muchos cuidados nada más, y pues creía que iba a quedar más pendejo de lo que estaba.
pero en la escuela, ¿no?
Me alivianó, patrón. Y mucho.
Acá empezaste a consumir alguna sustancia y ¿qué fue lo primero?
Lo primero fue alcohol.
¿A qué edad?
17, 18 años.
¿Tu máximo consumo de alcohol en un día cuánto llegó a ser?
2 botellas de rancho escondido. Lo que pasa es que no me hace absolutamente nada el rancho. Tomo tonalla rancho y... Pero no fuera cerveza. Me pone hasta la madre.
La última vez que consumiste alcohol hace cuánto tiempo?
Hace como 3 meses. Casi ni tomo. No tomo, no fumo, no me drogo. Mi sangre está completamente limpia.
¿Alguna vez sí probaste alguna sustancia?
Sí, de morro,
¿Qué fue?
activo, una ocasión un cigarrillo de marihuana. Nada más.
Además de probar.
Y en el ejército me iban a probar cocaína. Eso nada más es una prueba. Si quieres saber lo que estás combatiendo, debes de probar.
¿Ahorita alguna molestia tienes en alguna parte de tu cuerpo?
Siempre me sale en mi cabeza, patrón.
Eso,
Nada más.
desde la caída, ¿no?
Y yo siempre le he dicho a mis hijos, me molesta. Se lo he dicho al patrón también. Estos son patrones nuevos que todavía no. Ese perrito negro, tras el cáncer, patrón, eso lo dije a mi esposa miles de veces. Ese perrito negro me purga. Se dejan cosas muchas veces.
¿Y siempre ha sido el perro igual? ¿Ha crecido? ¿Sigue siendo la misma figura?
Yo siempre estoy loco, padrón. Pero no estoy loco, padrón. Yo lo veo.
Tú lo percibes.
Ahí está. Con Don Silvio, donde yo trabajaba, patrón, otra vez eso voy a traer agüita para mi perrito. No, ni me diga eso porque en Chile yo estoy bien. Pasó un pinche perro y yo lo acabo de ver. No, me molesta que me traten de decir güey, porque mi cabeza no da para eso. Me oculté muchísimos años de la policía hasta ahorita que vine a caer. Yo vi a ese pinche perro negro. No pasan de decirme loco, pendejo.
Pues sería todo, Juan Carlos. Te agradezco mucho.
Gracias, padre. Y me gusta mucho que me escribas.
Pues todo.
Justice came in waves. Initial sentences in 2019, 15 to 40 years per case. By 2020 to 2021, 9 convictions, including life imprisonment for the murder of 13-year-old Luz del Carmen Miranda, with accumulated totals of 327 to 367 plus years across charges of feminicide, illegal burial, and human trafficking. As of the mid-2000s, no releases or major changes have occurred. They remain incarcerated as high-risk inmates in Mexico's prison system. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, hit the like button, and share for more raw global cases.